I want you to look at your watch. Watch the second-hand tick. We are taught that time moves forward, 1 second after another. We are taught that history is a straight line, a clean, predictable ladder, rising from the mud to the stars. First came the slime, then the fish, then the lizards, then the apes, and finally, in the very last second of the geological clock, us. It is a comfortable story. It makes us feel special. It makes us feel safe. But it is a lie. What if I told you that the ladder's broken? What if I told you that beneath the ground you're standing on right now, there are objects that refuse to obey that timeline? Objects that have been dug up, tagged, and then quietly disappeared. I am not talking about myths. I am not talking about legends. I'm talking about hard physical evidence. I am talking about metal forged when the earth was still molten. I am talking about art carved when our ancestors were supposed to be swinging from trees. I'm talking about gold worn as jewelry in a time when the only kings on this planet were dragonflies the size of hawks. Mainstream science calls these objects anomalies. They say they are mistakes. But when you read the suppressed dossiers, specifically the research found in The Hidden History of the Human Race by Michael Cremo, you realize these aren't mistakes. They are fragments of a deleted file. There is a mechanism at work in our universities and museums. I call it knowledge filtration. It is a silent, invisible machine that protects the official theory of evolution. When a discovery fits the theory, it is put on a pedestal. But when a discovery breaks the theory, it is filtered out. It is labeled a hoax. It is buried in the basement storage bins of the Smithsonian, never to be seen again. They think you can't handle the truth. They think that if you knew how deep the history of humanity really goes, the whole textbook would fall apart. Well, tonight we are going to tear the textbook apart. I have pulled 3 specific case files from the archives. 3 objects that simply should not exist. One from the age of dinosaurs, one from the age of ice, and one from an age before life itself was supposed to exist. If you are ready to see what they are hiding, welcome to the Relic Files. Let's open the first file. The Klerksdorp Spheres of South Africa. In the western Transvaal, near the town of Ottosdal, miners have spent decades working in pyrophyllite deposits. Pyrophyllite is a soft secondary mineral, a substance that registers a mere 3 on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. For the uninitiated, the Mohs scale was devised by Friedrich Mohs to categorize minerals from the softest, talc, to the hardest, diamond. To find anything inside a level 3 mineral should be easy. To find a metallic object that defies a steel point is an impossibility. The rock in these mines was formed by sedimentation approximately 2.8 billion years ago. This is the Precambrian era. According to every textbook on your shelf, 2.8 billion years ago, life on Earth was limited to single-celled organisms. There were no plants, no animals, and certainly no hands capable of precision engineering. Yet, within this ancient rock, miners have uncovered hundreds of metallic spheres. They come in 2 distinct types. One is a solid bluish metal flecked with white. The other is a hollow ball with a white spongy center. This spongy core is a forensic nightmare. In many specimens, when the outer shell is breached, the interior is so delicate that it turns to dust upon contact with the atmosphere. Rolf Marx, the curator of the Klerksdorp Museum, has stood over these globes and admitted they are a complete mystery. They look manufactured, yet they rest in rock from a time when intelligent life wasn't even a glimmer in the eye of evolution. The most damning feature of these spheres is the geometry. Many of them feature 3 parallel grooves running with perfect precision around their equator. I want you to visualize that. Nature is capable of forming spheres through a process called concretion, where minerals harden around a central nucleus. But nature does not machine tool 3 perfectly parallel lines around the middle of a metal ball. When the mainstream geologists, men like Professor A. Bischoff, are forced to look at these, they cry limonite concretions. Limonite is an iron ore. but it only registers between 4 and 5.5 on the Mohs scale. The Klerksdorp spheres are so hard they cannot be scratched by a steel point, suggesting a structural integrity far beyond natural limonite. Furthermore, natural concretions usually occur in clusters, resembling soap bubbles fused together. They do not appear as isolated, perfectly round, balanced objects. While some have claimed that the balance of these spheres is so precise that it exceeds the capabilities of modern zero-gravity manufacturing, the Brahmins simply look the other way. If these were manufactured and the forensic weight of those grooves suggests they were, then we are looking at intelligent, tool-using beings existing at the very dawn of the planet's geological history. Now, we move forward in time, but deeper into the mystery. Case 2. The Nampa Figurine. In 1889, in the town of Nampa, Idaho, a man named M.A. Kurtz was boring an artesian well. This wasn't a shallow dig. The drill reached a staggering 300 feet. To reach that depth, the crew had to penetrate 50 feet of topsoil, 15 feet of solid basalt, and then pass through alternate beds of clay and quicksand. At the 300-foot level, the sand pump brought up a collection of clay balls, heavily coated with iron oxide. And among those balls, it brought up a piece of art, a small human image, about 1.5 inches long, formed in clay. The Nampa figurine is a female figure with lifelike lineaments that G.F. Wright noted would do credit to the classic centers of art. But art is not supposed to exist 300 feet below the Idaho surface. The U.S. Geological Survey has identified the clay layer at that depth as part of the Glens Ferry Formation, belonging to the Pleo-Pleistocene era. That makes this little clay doll approximately 2 million years old. The knowledge filter immediately went into overdrive to kill this find. W.H. Holmes of the Smithsonian Institution claimed the figurine was just a modern Indian toy that had descended from the surface through some crevice. But the forensic evidence of the drill site tells a different story. The well was 6 inches in diameter, and, crucially, it was tubed with heavy iron tubing. This tubing was driven down from the top and screwed together section by section as the work progressed. It was a closed system. Nothing could have slipped in from the sides or fallen down from the surface. The sand pump only brought up what was at the bottom of that sealed pipe. Furthermore, there is the matter of the iron oxide patches. Professor F.W. Putnam examined the figurine and found patches of anhydrous red oxide of iron in the protected crevices of the doll. This is not something a hoaxer can fake in a basement. It is a signature of great antiquity, a chemical process that occurs over vast stretches of time while an object is embedded in the earth. Wright even compared the discoloration on the figurine to the clay balls found at the same depth and found them to be identical. At 2 million years ago, the only human ancestors supposed to be walking the earth were the Australopithecines, ape-like creatures with tiny brains and no recorded history of artistic expression. Yet the Nampa doll shows a modern aesthetic, a sophisticated understanding of the human form. It suggests that humans like us were in America millions of years before the Bering Land Bridge was even a theory. Which leads us to the final and perhaps most startling piece of evidence. Case 3. The gold chain and coal. Imagine the Earth 300 million years ago. This is the Carboniferous period, the Coal Age. The world is a vast, humid swamp filled with giant ferns, towering lycopod trees, and massive insects. There are no mammals, there are no primates, there are certainly no jewelers. On June 11, 1891, in Morrisonville, Illinois, Mrs. S.W. Culp was breaking a lump of coal to put into her kitchen scuttle. As the lump fell apart, she saw something glinting in the black heart of the rock. It was a gold chain about 10 inches in length of antique and quaint workmanship. Now, look at the forensic smoking gun in this case. Mrs. Culp didn't just find a chain near some coal. The Morrisonville Times reported that as the lump of coal broke, it separated almost in the middle. The chain had been embedded in a circular shape. As the rock split, the middle of the chain became loosened, but the two ends remained fastened to the coal. This is the most critical detail. If the chain had been dropped by a miner or a visitor, It would have been lying in a crack or on the surface. It would not have had its ends embedded in the solid matrix of the rock itself. This chain was there when the coal was formed. It was trapped when the carboniferous swamps were being compressed into the fuel of our industrial age. The Illinois State Geological Survey has identified the source of that coal as the Taylorville or Panna mines, dating it between 260 and 320 million years old. The chain was 8-karat gold. Who was wearing 8-karat gold jewelry in the age of amphibians? This is not an isolated incident. It mirrors the iron cup found in an Oklahoma coal mine in 1912, which fell out of a solid chunk of 312 million-year-old coal, leaving its impression in the mold of the rock. So why aren't these artifacts in the textbooks? Why is the history of our species presented as a tidy, recent climb from the apes? The answer is the fate of the scientists who refuse to look away. Consider Thomas E. Lee of the National Museum of Canada. In the 1950s, he found advanced stone tools in glacial till at Shegyanda, dating back at least 65,000 years. For the crime of challenging the 12,000-year entry date into America, Lee was hounded from his position into prolonged unemployment. Publication outlets were cut off. His artifacts were vanished into storage bins, and the director of the National Museum was himself fired for refusing to fire Lee. As Lee said, Shegyanda would have forced the Brahmins to admit they didn't know everything, so it had to be killed. Consider Virginia Steen McIntyre, a geologist for the U.S. Geological Survey. In the 1960s, her team used 4 different dating methods to conclude that the sophisticated stone tools at Hueyatlaco, Mexico, were 250,000 years old. Because this date contradicted the theory that Homo sapiens evolved much later, Steen McIntyre was labeled an opportunist and a publicity seeker. Her career was effectively destroyed. She lost her job, her funding, and her professional reputation. She was told that permission to publish her photos would be denied if she intended to mention the lunatic fringe date of 250,000 years. This is how the script is maintained. The knowledge filter doesn't just hide objects, it destroys the people who find them. We are told we are the pinnacle of a recent accidental evolution, but the grooved spheres of South Africa, the figurine of Idaho, and the gold chain of Illinois tell a different story. They tell us that humanity is of great antiquity. We have been here before. We have built, we have forged, we have created art, and we have worn gold in ages that the Brahmins say belonged only to the rocks and the reptiles. History is not a straight line. It is a series of circles we've forgotten how to trace. And tonight we have only just begun to scratch the surface of what lies beneath the ink. This is the Relic Explorer. Join the investigation.